I asked when my son's wedding would be, and my daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye, her lips curling into a smile that felt colder than ice. "We got married yesterday," she said, almost savoring the words. "Only special people were invited." For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard her right. Yesterday. Special people. My hands tightened around the phone, but my son stood silent at her side, his gaze fixed on the floor like a guilty child. My name is Stephen Langley, and for 58 years I've tried to live a life of quiet integrity. I was the kind of man who worked without complaint, who believed in duty and sacrifice. When my wife, Margaret, passed away a decade ago, she left me not just with memories, but with a modest inheritance, money meant to carry me through my old age. Instead, I spent it on my son, Adam, because I thought that's what Margaret would have wanted. Rent when he was struggling, furniture when their apartment was bare, groceries when their fridge was empty. Piece by piece, I gave away my safety net, convincing myself it was love. And now I wasn't even special enough to attend his wedding. I remember the pale blue tie I had bought weeks earlier, thinking I'd wear it proudly as the father of the groom. It still hung in my closet, unworn, like a symbol of a role I'd been cut out of. The sting wasn't just the humiliation, it was the betrayal. For 3 years I'd carried them, quietly pulling from Margaret's inheritance every time their bills piled up. I told myself it was temporary, that once Adam found his footing, he'd repay me with gratitude, if not with money. Instead, he repaid me with silence, while his bride smirked and rewrote the definition of family right in front of me. I should have said something then. I should have slammed the door, cut the transfers, demanded respect. But I didn't. I froze, caught between anger and heartbreak, between the urge to fight and the fear of losing my son completely. A week passed. 7 long days of pretending to move on, though every corner of my house whispered reminders. The unused tie, the unopened envelope with the check I had written as a wedding gift, the photograph of Margaret smiling from the mantel, as if asking why I kept allowing myself to be diminished. Then the phone rang. It was her voice this time. The same daughter-in-law who had told me I wasn't special. But now her tone had shifted. Gone was the icy superiority. In its place was panic. "Stephen," she said, her breath shaky, "the rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, we'll be kicked out. Did you make the transfer?" I didn't answer right away. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the wooden table that had been mine and Margaret's since our first apartment. I remembered all the mornings she sat across from me, sipping coffee, planning a future where we'd grow old together. She had trusted me with her savings, her legacy, her love. And here I was, funneling it into the pockets of 2 adults who couldn't even invite me to their vows. My silence stretched on the line. I could hear her swallow, could almost picture her glancing at Adam, urging him to say something, to fix this. But he stayed quiet, as he always did. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not grief, but a cold clarity. For the first time since Margaret's passing, I realized the inheritance she left me wasn't just money. It was meant to protect me, to honor the years we built together, and I had squandered it, but not anymore. I finally drew a breath, my voice calm but carrying a weight I hadn't used in years. I said softly, "You told me once that only special people were invited. So tell me, what does that make me now?" On the other end, there was nothing but silence.
After I hung up the phone, I sat there for a long time, staring at the checkbook on the counter. For years, it had been my lifeline to Adam and his wife, line after line of withdrawals, each one signed in my handwriting, each one justified as help. I had told myself that love wasn't about keeping score. But Margaret had warned me once, in that gentle way of hers, that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's surrender. The house was too quiet without her. I walked into the bedroom, opened the cedar box at the foot of the bed, and ran my hand over the envelope that still held part of her inheritance. $10,000. That's all that was left from the 25 she had left me, after 3 years of rent payments, grocery bills, furniture, even a down payment on their car. I used to think I was honoring her by giving it away. Now it felt like I had betrayed her trust. I remembered her voice on the last night in the hospital. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself, Stephen. Don't give yourself away until there's nothing left." At the time, I thought she meant emotionally. Now I realized she meant everything. The memories hit me in flashes. The time I skipped repairing my truck so Adam could buy a new laptop. The winter I kept the thermostat low so I could cover their heating bill. The day I withdrew $2,000, money Margaret had set aside for our retirement trip, and handed it over to Lena, who said she needed it for wedding plans. I had believed her, and I had smiled, thinking I'd be part of those plans. I wasn't. The betrayal burned, but beneath it something colder was forming, a determination I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about reclaiming something I'd lost, my self-respect. I poured myself a coffee and sat at the kitchen table where Margaret and I had once planned out our future in neat little columns of numbers. This time, I opened a fresh notebook and began to make a new list. Not for Adam, not for Lena, for me. Rent transfers, canceled. Emergency fund, locked down. Remaining inheritance, preserved no matter the pressure. I ran the numbers over and over, and each time I came back to the same figure, $33,000 in total if I added every transfer, every gift, every sacrifice since Margaret's death. 33,000. The number was obscene, not because of the money itself, but because of the emptiness it bought me. The phone buzzed again. Adam this time. I didn't pick up. I just watched his name flicker across the screen, remembering how it used to light me up when he called. Now it felt like a warning sign. As the ringing faded, I caught my reflection in the dark window. My own eyes startled me. There was a hardness there I hadn't seen before, a line drawn where there used to be none. Margaret would have recognized it. She always said I was slow to anger, but once the line was crossed, there was no going back. I closed the notebook, slid it into the cedar box beside Margaret's envelope, and locked it. For the first time in years, the money felt safe. I felt safe. But deep down, I knew safety wouldn't last. Adam and Lena weren't the kind to accept no. They would come back, they would push harder, and when they did, they would find a man they no longer recognized. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house creak in the darkness. My phone lit up twice more on the nightstand. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I whispered into the silence, as if Margaret could still hear me. I've finally drawn the line, love, and when they cross it, because they will, I'll be ready.
It didn't take long. 3 days after the rent call, I heard the crunch of tires in my driveway. I glanced through the window and saw Adam's car. Lena sitting in the passenger seat with her arms crossed, her face set like stone. For a moment, I thought of not opening the door, pretend I wasn't home. But I'd lived enough years to know that avoidance only feeds vultures. When I opened the door, Adam tried to smile. It was the same smile he used as a boy when he broke a neighbor's window and wanted me to pay for it. "Dad," he said, voice warm, too warm. "Can we come in? We need to talk." Lena didn't wait for an answer. She brushed past me and settled onto my couch, bought with Margaret's inheritance, like she owned the place. She smoothed her skirt, eyes roaming the room as if assessing what might be hers one day. I closed the door slowly, deliberately. "Say what you need to say," I told them. Adam cleared his throat. "Look, Dad, about the wedding. We didn't mean to hurt you. It was just complicated. Complicated. That was the word they had rehearsed. I let it hang there. Lena leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Stephen, you know we love you. You're family. We just wanted something small." But now things are really tight. The landlord's threatening to evict us. We thought you had already made the transfer." She said it like it was a routine, like ordering coffee. I walked to the mantel and picked up the framed photo of Margaret. For a second, I almost let myself crumble. She would have wanted me to keep peace, but peace had cost me $33,000 and a hollow seat at my son's wedding. I set the frame down carefully, turned back and said, "There won't be any more transfers." The room froze. Adam blinked. "What do you mean, no more transfers? Dad, we need this. We counted on you." "Then you counted wrong." My voice was calm, but it felt like steel scraping stone. Lena scoffed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Stephen, don't be ridiculous. You've always helped us. Why stop now? What are you going to do with that money anyway? Sit on it while we get thrown out on the street?" I studied her. The same woman who told me I wasn't special enough to attend her wedding was now lecturing me about duty. "Margaret left that money for me," I said quietly. "Not for you, not for rent, for me." For the first time, Lena's composure cracked. "We're your family," she hissed. "If you loved us, you wouldn't let this happen." "If you loved me," I answered, "you would have saved me a seat at your wedding." The silence that followed was sharper than any shout. Adam shifted uncomfortably, but Lena's eyes hardened. I could see it. She wasn't going to let go. This wasn't a plea anymore. It was the opening move of a battle. Adam finally stood, trying to soften the edges. "Dad, let's not fight. We'll figure something out, okay?" But his words lacked conviction. He knew something had changed. The door he used to push open with ease was now locked. As they walked out, Lena turned back. Her smile was gone, replaced by something colder. "You'll regret this, Stephen. You can't just cut us off. We'll be back." I watched them drive away, the taillights glowing red against the dusk. For years, I had feared losing my son, but as the silence settled back over the house, I realized I had already lost him. What remained now was a different fear, not of losing, but of what they might try next. I went to the cedar box again, touched Margaret's envelope, and whispered, "They think I'm weak. They have no idea what's coming."
The next week, I noticed a different car in my driveway. Sleek, black, polished. When I opened the door, it wasn't Adam or Lena standing there. It was her mother, Evelyn Carlisle. I had met Evelyn twice before, both times at holiday dinners where she dominated the room with her voice and her perfume. She was the kind of woman who measured worth in jewelry and invitations, who always seemed to look right through me. Now she was on my doorstep, smiling with that condescending warmth that felt more like a threat. "Stephen," she said, her tone sugary, "I thought we should talk about Adam and Lena." I didn't invite her in, but she swept past me anyway, heels clicking against my hardwood floor. She stopped in the living room, looked around, and gave a small nod of approval, as if inspecting property she might one day inherit. "They're under a lot of stress," she began, perching herself on the edge of my sofa. "The rent, the wedding expenses, you know how it is. Young couples struggle." I stayed standing. "They're not struggling because of me, Evelyn. They're struggling because they've built their lives on my money. That ends now." Her smile thinned, just slightly. "Stephen, don't be hasty. Family is about sacrifice. Lena tells me you've been difficult lately, refusing calls, holding back support. She's worried about you." There it was, the shift from persuasion to insinuation. Worried about me. The implication that I was unstable. I had seen the same tactic in boardrooms when I was younger. Undermine the man, then take his authority. I crossed my arms. "Lena excluded me from my own son's wedding, Evelyn.
And then she came begging for rent. Does that sound like concern to you? For a moment, her mask slipped. Her eyes hardened. You're holding on to bitterness. That's dangerous at your age. Maybe it's grief, maybe confusion, but if you keep shutting them out, people will start to wonder if you're, well, capable of handling things alone. The words landed like a warning shot. This wasn't just a family visit. It was the opening argument of a case being built. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Tell Lena this. The transfers are done. The inheritance stays with me. And if you think you can frighten me into giving it back, you're welcome to try. Evelyn stood, adjusting her pearl necklace, her eyes cold now. Stephen, I've raised my daughter to know her worth. She won't let herself or Adam be cast aside. If you won't help them willingly, then perhaps others will decide what's best for you. With that, she left, the click of her heels echoing down the hallway. The front door shut, and the silence felt heavier than before. I sat down slowly, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't just Adam and Lena anymore. Evelyn was involved, and she had resources, connections, influence. They weren't going to stop at begging. They were going to escalate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Margaret's voice in my head. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I had failed that promise for years, giving everything away. But not anymore. If Evelyn wanted a war, she'd find I wasn't the helpless old man she thought I was. At midnight, I pulled out my notebook again. On a fresh page, I wrote only 5 words. Protect myself at all costs. The game had changed, and I knew it.
I should have known Evelyn's visit was just the beginning. She hadn't come to appeal to me. She'd come to lay the groundwork. 2 days later, I noticed a neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, from across the street, watching me far too closely. She waved when I caught her eye, but there was something curious, almost probing, in her smile. By evening, another neighbor, Mr. Dorsey, stopped by the mailbox and asked if everything was all right. He hadn't spoken more than 5 words to me in years. Now he wanted to know if I was feeling well and if I needed any help around the house. The questions were loaded, and I knew whose hand was behind them. Evelyn's. She was spreading doubts, planting seeds. That night I made coffee and sat with Margaret's photo. They're trying to build a case, I whispered. Not against my money, against me. The next morning, when I went to collect the mail, I saw Adam's car parked 2 houses down. He wasn't even trying to hide. I walked back inside and found the kitchen window slightly ajar. My gut tightened. Nothing looked disturbed, but I knew that wasn't the point. The point was to rattle me, to make me feel watched, vulnerable. I checked the cedar box where Margaret's envelope rested. Still there. My notebook, too. But if they were bold enough to come into my house once, they'd do it again. I called the locksmith and had the locks changed that afternoon. While the man worked, I thought about Margaret. She had trusted me to protect her memory, her legacy. For years, I had let Adam and Lena chip away at it. That ended now. The real blow came 2 days later. A letter arrived from my bank. It was addressed to me, but the envelope had already been opened. Inside was a notice confirming updates to your automatic transfers. My hands trembled as I read it. Someone had tried to restart the payments I had canceled. I drove to the branch immediately. Mr. Collins, the bank manager, pulled me into his office. "Stephen," he said carefully, "your daughter-in-law came by last week. She insisted she was authorized to handle your accounts. She even had a document with your signature." My stomach turned cold. "Did you believe her?" He shook his head. "The signature didn't match. I stalled, told her the system was down, but she'll be back."
He slid the forged document across the desk. I stared at my name, written in a shaky hand that wasn't mine. Lena. I folded the paper and slipped it into my jacket. Thank you, Collins. You've done me a service. Driving home, I felt the weight of it pressing down. They weren't just asking anymore. They were forging, scheming, trying to strip me of the last defenses I had. That night, the phone rang again. Adam's voice was tense, almost rehearsed. Dad, we heard you've been acting strange. Neighbors are worried. Maybe we should sit down and figure this out before it gets worse. I let him talk. I let him think his words were sinking in. But inside, something sharper was forming. For years, they had counted on my silence, on my reluctance to fight. That silence was over. When I hung up, I wrote a single line at the bottom of my notebook page. If they want a war, I'll give them one, on my terms. I closed the book, locked the cedar box, and turned off the lights. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the darkness.
It started on a quiet Thursday morning. I was pouring coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a woman in a gray suit, holding a folder. She wasn't a neighbor, wasn't a solicitor. She had the official air of someone who came backed by paperwork. "Mr. Langley?" she asked when I opened the door. "My name is Miss Hayes. I'm a social worker with County Services. We've received a report expressing concern about your well-being. I need to conduct a brief wellness check." Concern. The word burned. Evelyn's fingerprints were all over this. I studied her badge. It looked real enough. "And who exactly is concerned?" "I can't disclose that," she said smoothly. "But the report states you've recently withdrawn from family contact, made abrupt financial changes, and may be experiencing confusion." Confusion. The same poisoned word Evelyn had used in my living room. I stepped aside, letting her in. Refusal would have made me look worse. She sat on my couch, the one I had paid for, and began her questions. "Do you manage your own finances, Mr. Langley?" I smiled faintly. "Would you like to see my bank statements? Every bill is paid, every account in order." She hesitated. That wasn't the answer she expected. "Do you live independently?" "As you can see, the house is clean, stocked, and maintained. I drive, I cook, I keep my own schedule." Her pen scratched slower now. "Do you take any medication?" "Only vitamins and the occasional aspirin. No prescriptions." She tried one last angle. "Your family says you've been acting paranoid, installing security systems, avoiding calls." I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "If someone broke into your home and forged your signature at the bank, would you call that paranoia or self-preservation?" For the first time, her expression shifted. The professional mask cracked just slightly. "I'll need to follow up," she said, gathering her papers. "Do that," I replied evenly. "But next time, bring a lawyer, because if this is harassment, I'll treat it as such." When she left, the silence in the house felt sharper than ever. I sat down at the table, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. They weren't just trying to take my money anymore. They were trying to take my name, my competence, my dignity. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought circled like a vulture. What if a judge believed them? What if one signature stripped me of everything? At 2 a.m., I pulled out my notebook and wrote a plan. Step 1, document everything. Every forged paper, every visit, every call. Step 2, secure allies, people who could testify that I was sound, capable, sane. Step 3, prepare for court, because that's where this was heading. The next morning,
I went to see an old acquaintance, Mark Fletcher, a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in years, but who once handled Margaret's estate. He listened quietly as I laid everything out: the exclusion from the wedding, the rent payments, the forgery, the visit from the social worker. When I finished, he shook his head. "Stephen, this is a textbook case of financial exploitation. They're building a narrative to have you declared incompetent so they can seize control of your assets. It happens more often than you'd think." He leaned forward. "But you've got something they don't. Clarity, documentation, a story that cuts through their lies. If they want to drag this into court, we'll meet them there." Walking out of his office, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't just defending myself, I was preparing to fight back. Still, as I pulled into my driveway, I saw Adam's car parked across the street. He wasn't hiding anymore. He rolled down his window, stared at me, and smiled. It wasn't the smile of a son. It was the smile of a man convinced he was winning. I looked back at him, calm as stone. He had no idea how wrong he was.
The letter arrived on a Monday morning, slipped under my door in a thick white envelope. My name, Stephen Langley, was typed neatly on the front, but the weight of it was heavier than paper. Inside was a petition filed in county court. Adam and Lena Carlisle Langley, with Evelyn Carlisle listed as supporting party, requesting a guardianship hearing. My hands tightened around the pages. The words blurred, but the meaning was crystal clear. They weren't asking anymore. They were demanding, legally, formally. They wanted a judge to declare me incompetent and place my finances under Adam's control. I read every line carefully. They had witnesses, 2 neighbors claiming I'd been acting erratically, a pharmacist saying I had confused prescriptions, and Evelyn herself swearing that my judgment had deteriorated. Lies stacked on lies, signed and notarized. For a moment, my knees almost gave out. To see it written, official, stamped, it was like standing on the edge of a cliff. But then I remembered Mark Fletcher's words: documentation and clarity. I wasn't powerless, I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. That afternoon, I met Mark at his office. He scanned the petition, jaw tightening. "They've moved fast," he said, "but we'll move faster. Stephen, this is exactly the playbook of financial predators. They're trying to paint you as unstable. We'll counter with evidence." "What kind of evidence?" I asked. "Medical, financial, and testimonial. We'll get a cognitive assessment from Dr. Howard. He's one of the most respected evaluators in the state. We'll pull your bank statements to prove you're in control of every transaction. And we'll line up witnesses, real witnesses, to testify about your clarity." I thought of Eleanor Brooks, my neighbor who'd brought me coffee after hearing the shouting. Of Mr. Collins at the bank who'd seen Lena try to forge my signature. Of the locksmith who'd watched me take decisive steps to secure my home. People who had seen me act not like a confused old man, but like someone fighting to reclaim his life. Mark leaned back, studying me. "The key, Stephen, is not just proving you're competent, it's showing the court that they're motivated by greed. If we do that, the case collapses." I left his office with a folder of instructions and a strange sense of calm. They wanted a war in the open. Fine, I'd give them one. 3 days later, the first hearing was scheduled. I arrived early, wearing my best gray suit, the one Margaret had bought me for our 25th anniversary. Walking into that courtroom, I could almost hear her voice. "Stand tall, Stephen. Don't let them define you." Adam and Lena sat at the opposite table.
Evelyn between them, like a queen flanked by her heirs. Adam avoided my gaze, but Lena's eyes were sharp, almost triumphant. Evelyn smiled faintly, as if the outcome was already sealed. The judge entered, papers rustling. The case was called. Adam's lawyer, a polished man with a practiced tone, painted me as paranoid, confused, unstable. He spoke of abrupt financial changes, isolation, episodes of hostility. He used my decision to cancel transfers as if it were proof of mental decline. Every sacrifice I had made for Adam and Lena was twisted into a weapon against me. Then it was our turn. Mark stood, calm and deliberate. "Your Honor, what you've heard is not the story of incompetence. It's the story of a man exploited by those closest to him, a man who finally drew a boundary after years of financial and emotional abuse." He handed up documents, bank statements showing perfect order, receipts of payments I had made over the years, the canceled transfers. Then he called Mr. Collins, the bank manager, who testified that Lena had tried to restart the transfers with a forged signature. Then came Eleanor, who told the court how I had handled myself with clarity and resolve after cutting Adam and Lena off. Finally, Dr. Howard presented his evaluation. Mr. Langley's cognitive scores are well above average for his age. He is fully capable of managing his own affairs. By the time Mark sat down, I could see cracks forming in Lena's expression. Evelyn leaned close, whispering furiously. Adam just looked down, his hands clenched tight. The judge didn't rule that day. He said more testimony would be required. But as I walked out of that courtroom, past Adam and Lena, I saw the fear flicker in their eyes. For the first time, they understood this was not going to be easy. And for the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt the taste of victory. Not yet won, but close enough to imagine.
The courthouse was colder the morning of the final hearing. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, catching the dust in the air, as if even the building itself were holding its breath. I sat at my table, my hands folded calmly, while across the aisle, Adam and Lena whispered to their attorney. Evelyn sat stiffly, pearls around her neck, her face unreadable. The judge entered, gavel striking once. "We are here to conclude the guardianship petition for Mr. Stephen Langley." Adam's lawyer rose first, repeating his claims that I had become paranoid, withdrawn, reckless with money. He spoke smoothly, but there was a hollowness now, as though even he knew the foundation was cracking. Lena dabbed her eyes with a tissue at practiced intervals, while Adam stared down at his hands. Then Mark stood. His voice was steady, measured, but every word landed like a hammer. "Your Honor, this is not a case about confusion or incompetence. It is a case about greed. For 3 years, Mr. Langley supported his son and daughter-in-law with more than $30,000. He paid their rent, bought their furniture, even covered their emergencies. And how was he repaid? By being excluded from his own son's wedding, by forgery, by lies, and by this baseless petition." He placed a thick folder on the bench. "Inside, you'll find documentation of every transfer, testimony from credible witnesses, and a medical evaluation confirming Mr. Langley's competence. What you will not find is any evidence, any real evidence, that he is incapable of managing his affairs." The judge leafed through the folder slowly. The room was so quiet I could hear Lena's shallow breathing. Finally, the judge looked up. His voice was firm, unshaken. "After reviewing the evidence, it is the judgment of this court that Mr. Stephen Langley is fully competent to manage his own finances and personal affairs.
The petition for guardianship is hereby denied. The gavel struck again, final and sharp. A rush of air left my chest, though I hadn't realized I'd been holding it. Beside me, Mark gave a small nod, satisfied but not smug. Across the aisle, Evelyn's face tightened into fury, while Lena's tears vanished as quickly as they had come. Adam just sat frozen, his jaw clenched, his future unraveling in front of him. As the courtroom emptied, Adam approached. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, that maybe some fragment of the boy I'd raised was still there. But when he opened his mouth, the words were bitter. "You'll regret this, Dad. One day you'll need us." I looked at him, my voice calm, steady. "I already needed you, Adam, and you weren't there." He flinched, just slightly, before turning away with Lena at his side. Evelyn swept out behind them, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. When the doors closed, silence filled the room. Not the silence of defeat I had lived with for years, but something purer, the silence of freedom. That evening, I walked through my house differently. The rooms felt lighter, no longer haunted by the weight of sacrifice. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same place where Margaret and I had once planned our lives. For the first time, I made plans just for myself. I would fix up the old truck. I would take the trip Margaret and I had always talked about, the coastal drive she dreamed of. I would plant her favorite flowers in the garden this spring. None of it would erase the betrayal, but it would honor her better than throwing money into a pit of ingratitude ever had. I lifted my cup toward her photo on the mantel. We did it, love. I finally kept my promise. I took care of myself. And as the night settled outside, I realized something. Losing Adam and Lena wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of living on my own terms.